Welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to help trauma therapists be their incredible selves, to be human, to be real, not just a clinician. I'm a big believer in who we are is more important than what we know. And this requires cultivating authenticity, genuineness, and vulnerability, and that requires intention. You can learn more about my courses and workshops by going to thetraumatherapistproject.com. That's thetraumatherapistproject.com. Let's get started. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the podcast. Very excited to have as my guest today, Donna Lyon. Donna, welcome.
Thank you, Guy. Great to be here.
All right. So Dr. Donna Lyon is the founder and CEO of Left, Right, Hook. That's right spelled with W-R-I-T-E, an evidence-based boxing and creative writing program for adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse and trauma. She's also the editor of the book Left, Right, Hook, Survivor Stories from a Creative Writing and Boxing Project, and producer of a documentary film that is in post-production about the same program. Donna, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Guy.
So I know it's crazy early. It's early there. I really appreciate you being here. But before we get going, share with our listeners where you're from originally and where you are currently.
Yeah, sure. I grew up in Melbourne, Australia, moved to Perth, Western Australia, which is a really kind of small, dry, hot part of Australia. I got out of there at 21 and went to London and then found myself back in Melbourne, Australia, and I've been here for the last 20 years.
Okay, awesome. So I'm not sure how I came across your work and what you do, but as soon as I read about you and saw what you were doing, I was just taken, and it's like, I gotta have this woman on here. I have to invite her on here. So how did this all come about for you, Donna?
I think the boxing and the writing, Left, Right, Hook really came about, I guess, as a culmination of me coming to terms, with my past abuse. And yeah, I was listening to a podcast the other day. And I was just like, oh my God, like I'm him. And I can't remember his name. You were interviewing him, and I was like, Philip or something. It's like, that's my story. The way that this guy's saying it is my story. Because it came out of basically.
Well, that was Phil Goldstein.
I was just like, I just want Phil to like kind of come into my body as I'm being interviewed, because I'm like, that's me. It came out of, a repressed, dissociated, disconnected childhood that was full of terror. And I think I was lucky in some respects that I found drama and media and art, like kind of making, at quite a young age. And I think that's really ultimately what kind of saved me, because it kept me really curious in life. I fell in love with the kind of imaginal world. And so and because I was dissociated anyway, I often lived in my head and very much outside of my body. So the idea to be in character, to be in imagination, to be in play, felt really safe and really empowering. And so that kind of passion and that love kept me motivated to keep doing life, because, I remember at the age of 9, I wrote a letter to God to say, can you take my life?
Oh my gosh.
And, I'm thinking like, where did that come from? Like I was 9. And of course, God didn't answer me. And I was forever angry. And so then I studied, media and drama, but I didn't really want to be an actor, because actually the truth was I couldn't connect. I couldn't connect with myself, with my body. And so, I ended up moving into production, into producing, and started a filmmaking career. But again, I think I found that the more I tried to do life and be adult, the worse it kind of got for me. The more I developed a body, became a woman, the worse it was. I developed a eating disorder. I turned to drugs at the age of 14 years of age anyway. I was taking LSD by myself, drinking, but everything was by myself. I loved, I only knew how to be outside of my body, into my head. And so, Yeah, just a long journey that ended up in sobriety in my 30s.
In your 30s, when you were going through the periods of dissociation and so forth, to what degree were you aware that was related to your childhood and the terror?
I had no idea.
No idea. At what point did you reach out for help?
Yeah. So at the age of 26, this is an interesting part of the story. So about 22, I went back to do a bachelor in majoring in performance studies. And it was a 3-year degree, and it was absolutely fantastic, and lots of movement, creative exploration. And of course, I ended up producing a lot of work that was about alter egos, sort of these dissociated parts of myself as characters. And after that, I went to do a postgrad of producing. And at the beginning of that year, that's when I had my first memory of being abused at 26. And that's how I started my postgraduate year. And I had no idea. And so I went into kind of therapy loosely, and I was experiencing effects of dissociation, but nobody named it. Nobody, I kind of knew it was to do with my child sexual abuse, but I was like a woman of action. I'm like, right, I've been abused. What am I going to do to fix it? Right. I'll go and interview the family. I'll, go and see somebody, and, I'll heal and move on with my life. It didn't work out like that.
So how did things unfold? When did you begin to get some relief?
Well, the more that I tried to sort of go into the trauma and, get healed, the worse it became. I just didn't have coping mechanisms. And also the abuse was so severe. And my body was in such a state of terror that it was just that I just shut down, or I'd regress into a child. But nobody, again, was there explaining, oh, this is dissociation. This is, likely DID, this is, etc. So that didn't come for 6 years. And that didn't come until I got sobriety. Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing to, first of all, I so appreciate you coming on here and sharing this intense. I mean, that doesn't even do it justice, to hear you talk about your upbringing as a kid and going through this. How did you survive?
Well, to me, I don't know if listeners agree, but I always say it's like the gift of dissociation. Mm-hmm. I'm really grateful that I dissociated.
Definitely.
Disconnected. And I do believe it is a, survival mechanism. It's a tool, it's a gift. And I think that I am a very high functioning person. And I don't think people would really know that about me and understand that, is part of my trajectory. So I was able to front really, really well. And again, I think it's just the fact that the trauma was so intense that it split off. And that's not easy now, as I guess I become that I'm in the adult world playing as an adult and trying to connect with the trauma and trying to connect with the memory and trying to connect with a narration of self to give me a kind of, I guess, a feeling of wholeness, a story. That's hard. But also at the same time too, that's actually what's kept me alive. That's what's kept me really functioning. And I think that's what's kept me being able to achieve so many things.
What did the healing process, what did the beginning of that look like for you?
Well, I got into 12-step program. It's just kind of what they say, I hit my rock bottom. I think the other thing is, Guy, I had no language for my internal world. And so I knew that inside my head, I wanted to kill myself, that I just hated myself so much, that I had such low self-esteem. I felt so much disgust, but I did not have the language for it. Mm-hmm. And so what was helpful about hitting that rock bottom and going into recovery, and even though that took 5 months to kind of get sober, and that's just an icky, gross journey full of, so much pain, but you also, if you do the work, the program does work. Mm-hmm. But what was great about that is that it started to give me a language, because through story and through people getting up and sharing their past histories and naming the stuff that was inside my head, I'm like, oh, that's me. Oh, mm-hmm. And so I began to be able to speak about it, not necessarily the abuse, but the effects. Mm-hmm. And that, again, was the beginning of this kind of narration of a new self.
So it's interesting you say that, and you also said, as we started, you had that recognition when I was interviewing Phil Goldstein. That's me. I can identify with that too. So how did Left Right Hook come about?
And so when I was in my mid-30s, so this was about 5 years into sobriety and recovery, I started boxing because I always liked fitness, and I always liked very physical activities. I hated yoga. I hated anything that kind of was like I had to sit still and be in my body. Of course, being dissociated and, having trauma kind of memories, not good for me, right? So anything kind of really physical, body-based, kind of aggressive, loved. And I was also feeling this incredible anger. And because I was a depressive and my feelings had been so numb, like I literally didn't know, I couldn't describe a feeling state. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh, this is interesting. I need to do something about this. Like, I feel really, really angry. And also I felt like I really wanted to punch someone in the face, right? So I'm like, okay, I should probably go and do something about this. And so I checked into boxing classes. And then within like a couple of months or a few months, I was like learning fighting, and I'm sparring, and then I'm in the ring. And so within, and of course, like kind of maybe typical, alcoholic and, maybe artist, I'm like, oh, this is going to be a good story. I'm straight in the ring. I'm fighting this woman. She's in her 50s. She's got a gold tooth, and I'm having a great time. It's fantastic. And so I thought, oh, this is kind of, cool. And it was a split decision, but in the end, went to her. It didn't matter. It was just the best feeling in the world. I loved it. And so I thought it's always going to be like this. But the second time I started to feel really a lot of anxiety and, and fear. And I lost the fight. The third time
were these like competition fights?
These were competition fights, okay. Right? So the third time, so this is like literally within the first 12 months of fighting, right? Oh. Of like starting boxing. The third time I dissociated in the ring. Wow. And I'm like, I remember sitting on the kind of bench, in the kind of little 2-minute, 30-second break or whatever. And I had this like part inside that say, they're bigger than me. I can't beat them. Mm. And I'm like, this is not good. I can't be dissociating and, in a ring fighting, because I'm going to get knocked out. Like, this is not cool. So the fighting journey in total lasted about kind of 18 months. Never really, I guess I kind of kept coming back to this idea of being in a ring to compete and to fight because I wanted to kind of confront the trauma. Mm-hmm. I wanted to beat the dissociation. And I kind of couldn't. And so I decided, well, okay, I'm not this boxing champion. What am I going to do? Mm-hmm. This has actually been, despite the fighting, which is, not where I'm winning. I love training. I love the empowering nature of boxing. I love the punching. I love the physicality. I love the location of being able to locate aggression and get it out. I want to work with other women, but because I felt like this kind of loser, mm-hmm. It's not like I could go, yeah, I won 5 fights, Right. I thought, well, what can I do that's different? And I thought, well, combined with my recovery experience, combined with my artistic experience, I'm an academic. So, I'm a facilitator, a teacher, a filmmaker. I've got all these suite of creative tools. Why don't we actually spend the first hour writing, where we write to a prompt and we get out shit that's inside ourselves, we get out stuff that's completely unconscious, because that's what's happening. That's where my stuff is. It's completely unconscious, and we write about it and we share, and then I teach them boxing, and we basically beat the shit out of a bag, and no one gets hurt, and we can scream and whatever we do, and so that's how Left Right Hook started.
Wow. Now, when you started boxing, was it a conscious effort to tackle your trauma?
Not to begin. I mean, in some respects, yes, because by the very nature of saying, I've got anger, I want to locate this and direct it, that's tackling trauma. So yes. But as I started to do it, and getting punched in the face and experiencing all the things that you do in boxing, it was bringing up a lot of stuff. And, I was in therapy, I was doing a lot, Guy, right? I went full guns blazing for my mental health, right? I had to. I did prayer ministry for 4 years. I was doing, recovery for, 5 years solid, therapy once a week. Literally I had to do something every day because the thoughts of wanting to kill myself were so pervasive. And so it was whatever I found, if that was doing something that felt like it was activating, healing, progressing, whatever was, really trapped inside me, I was sticking to it. And so boxing felt like that for me. It felt like a way for the first time where I could begin to connect my body with the trauma stuff, because I would just freeze. And so, actually, you can't do that, right? Don't freeze in boxing because you're going to get punched in the face, right? And so, it was it forced me to move out of that freezing. Now, that in a competitive space, that didn't necessarily eventuate, but in a training environment where you're held and nurtured and someone's there and you're kind of, able to the high stakes aren't there, that's a helpful, thing to do in practice.
Was there something during any of your experiences with therapy, was there something that one of your therapists did that clicked for you?
I think, really the location of parts. So I've been with my therapist now for nearly 10 years, and, it was really her that, clicked into talking to my parts. And I'm presuming all your listeners know parts. And I think once we started to talk to the parts, to do art therapy, to draw, and to really just kind of gently unearth that stuff that was in there, that was probably what clicked. And I think just, that reminder to really believe myself, because when I denied, which was my default and go-to, that's when, things would just stay worst. So I needed to validate myself constantly. Even because what was the hardest, Guy, and always is the hardest, I think, for survivors, like me, is when you don't have it was this person at this time, this date, and I was exactly this age, and it happened at this location, and he did this or she did this.
Right.
And, it felt like this, and that's not the truth is around dissociative memories is that they're fragmented, they're repressed, they're often stored in the body. They are stored in the body, and the research shows that. Yeah. And it doesn't necessarily come through explicit narrative. It comes through that implicit narrative, and that's a narrative of the body, the shaking, the shivering, the regressing, the terror. and that the brain can't compute a linear narrative to support that, but the body is telling.
Right. What was it about, or is it about parts work that resonated with you?
Just that's where the trauma lives.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the deep voices that held the truth seem to live. And so that's it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense.
Remind everyone I'm speaking with Donna Lyon, Dr. Donna Lyon. The book is Left, Right, Hook. Now, all right, give us a specific idea of what happens. What are you providing with Left, Right, Hook, this writing program?
A safe or secure space, small, intimate, where you come in declaring, not necessarily like fully explicitly, but by its very nature of joining up to the program, that you are a survivor of child sexual abuse, that you're carrying trauma. Often people don't tell anyone outside a therapist's office. They might just tell their close friends. So you're coming into a circle of people who are the same. And we really I try to establish emotional and psychological safety up front, which, takes time. We locate feelings, we do a check-in, we write, we share, we acknowledge, we might write again, share, acknowledge.
Now, give us an idea. What are you writing?
I come up with prompts. So the prompts could be provocative, like shame, disgust, mind, body. I turned around and, he said, could be anything. I remember, ...
Right.
And then it's whatever comes out. So usually I give about 3 prompts, which gives people choice, and then people choose and they write for about 10 minutes non-stop. And so the whole purpose is to bypass the kind of critical faculties. It's not about great writing per se. I think great writing comes out. The quality of the writing is excellent because it's honest and raw, but you're not setting out to write, incredible prose. And if you get stuck, there's a woman, Jen Cross, that I got this from. It's like, what I really want to say is what I really want to say is what I really want to say. And then that kind of tends to push past that blockage, like a writer's block. And so then people share. And it can be stuff that's very visceral. It can be stuff that just skirts around trauma. It can be stuff that people are like, oh, fuck. Most of the time it's stuff that when you hear someone else, you go, wow, I'm so sorry that happened to you.
Yeah.
That's so sad. And I think the other aspect of that is that you feel compassion for the person beside you. But because they actually are experiencing the same feelings and thoughts and beliefs that you experience, and by you experiencing compassion for them, perhaps I can feel compassion towards myself, because that's the hardest thing, again, is to accept self.
Wow. At what point does the boxing come in? And I can imagine that, and I'm sure you've realized this, but that could be triggering for a lot of people.
It is, but I'd say it's more empowering, and because we're not punching each other,
right?
It's not the boxing that I did. It's hitting a bag, it's hitting pads. It's even though I think being in the body, yes, can be triggering. I think that's the triggering part. But when you begin to use the empowering stance and movements of boxing, it quickly moves you through that. I think, and certainly I believe is the experience of many of the people. Now, that's not to say that. So after that first hour of writing and sharing, then we've pretty much dropped tools or pens, and we just kind of take a little break, and then we'd put our wraps on, and we just kind of, I just slowly start to come into the body just through obviously warm-ups. And then it's like, okay, like you're getting people moving straight away. And then all of a sudden they're punching, and then all of a sudden they're kind of like externalizing that crap that they were just writing about, and they're pushing each other because we've just had a really intimate and vulnerable moment. And so now actually I want to see you get that out. And so that's the beauty of it, And so yeah, I think most of the time I'd say most people feel like better like after the 2 hours. But I don't like to necessarily use language like that, because it's like better from what, Like I think people absolutely feel like, oh, okay, I'm more grounded. But sometimes, when you're writing and connecting with this stuff, you're going to feel worse. There's no guarantees.
So is this program, how long is it?
It goes for 8 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's an 8-week program, 2 hours a week. Okay. So it will be in blocks.
Wow. Now, is this in person or online or both?
In person.
Okay.
But in 2020, I ran a research project, and so I took it into the research space at the University of Melbourne, where I work, and COVID hit. So of course we had to pivot online. So that whole project kind of flipped on its head, and I ended up doing that whole program online with the participants.
Oh my gosh.
So basically it can be both, but at the moment I think it's best done in person.
Right. Now, during the 8 weeks, is there some kind of a progression? Is there a movement in? What is the goal here through the 8 weeks?
The goal for me is always to locate effects, locate the trauma, begin to identify, connect, establish, and then work towards externalization. So I try not to have grandiose goals. It's not about healing. It's a continuum, but it's about beginning to see that actually that happened to you. You're not at fault. And I think if people can begin, some people will obviously be at greater stages than others, but if they can begin to see themselves in the context of a wider socio, crisis or issue, then the work is done.
Now, I would imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but this experience might be helpful / healing for you, watching people move through this.
Okay, yeah, I set the program up for me. I'm not going to lie. I wanted to, write.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. Right?
No, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm sure you set the podcast up for yourself in many ways,
I benefit from this greatly, of course.
Totally, yeah. So absolutely. I think that it has been an incredible part of my healing and development of sense of self.
How so?
I think I just find constantly that I return to the things that maybe I say that haven't necessarily landed for me. And I'm not sure if I can give you a specific example, but I think I begin to believe what I say to people. Maybe it's things like, that it's not my shame. Even that's hard to kind of say it. Like I say it to others, but even just saying it to you right now, I'm like, oh gosh, there's tears, that it's not my fault, that, writing is a move towards healing, connection. It's relational healing. And I think, around just a kind of sense of integrity of self. It keeps me accountable.
Mm-hmm. Now, you also have a documentary.
Yeah, so the documentary came out of that research project. So I basically, whoever signed up for that, it was like, okay, we're doing an 8-week program. We're going to study the effects of it to, test whether this is actually good for your well-being, which, by the way, it was tick reduction in PTSD, tick reduction in depression, reduction in anxiety, increase in personal agency and resilience. That was done. And then it was like, but we're also going to probably write a book together where we'll publish our writings, and we're going to make a documentary. We don't know what that looks like or means. And because COVID, of course, hit, that has taken now, it's actually been a 2-year kind of participatory arts journey, I would say, that started out as an 8-week boxing workshop and has really transformed or evolved into this story of a group of survivors who are beginning to find a sense of agency and a politicization of their voice.
Mm. When you look at the landscape or the culture of how we are looking at sexual assault survivors, what are your thoughts on this? On how we as a culture are, how people are able or unable to come forward? I mean, what you're doing is creating a safe space for people to do that, and to in a sense, maybe not have as an objective heal, but to certainly move forward and to claim ownership of what happened. But when you look at how our culture is talking about survivorship and even dealing with it, what do you see?
Well, there's certainly a positive change in the narrative. I do see that. And, I'm so grateful for all the people that have come before us. This has been women and men that have fought for generations for change. So I'm just one little part of this, right? Praise our kind of brothers and sisters that have done that work, and never been believed and, had their careers ruined and all of this. I'm an out academic talking about sexual abuse. It's quite incredible. And that I can do that, not lose my job, actually be sort of celebrated, elevated. So that's a landscape that's changed. But child sexual abuse does remain a little hidden, dirty secret. And that's because it really happens in our families. Mm-hmm. And so to expose that means to break down the fabric of a kind of patriarchal family unit. And that's hard. Right. And I'm not setting out to do that, by the way. Unfortunately, child sexual abuse does that. Right. Just does it. Ruins, destroys families. And so I think that, the narrative, so that needs to become stronger, and more people like me need to speak out, but that takes time. And I think too that we need to begin to really understand how trauma is stored in the body, and we need to understand how memory is fragmented, and how memory is not linear, and how the brain is affected through trauma, and the nervous system. And so I just think that there's more work to be done, not necessarily by me, but by, researchers, psychologists, etc., to emphasize that narrative, because that's the stuff that's going to help people. And because, again, it took me 6 years for people to identify that my experiences were dissociated. I didn't have language for that. That shouldn't happen. Mm-hmm. A psychologist should have picked that up. They should have told me that. And so, I guess in some respects, maybe I do have a little agenda to push that, because, all of the symptoms that I showed indicated that I was sexually abused. It should have been picked up. And, so I think, I hope that makes sense.
It does. Donna, what's the best way for people to get in contact with you?
I think that they should head to leftrighthook.com, and we know that's WRITE. And just visit the website, check out the documentary link. You can contact me, and you can just keep up to date. Super inspiring. I'd love to have you back at a later date to keep up to date with what you're doing, and super appreciative of you coming on. Thank you so much. So grateful you reached out. Love the work you do as well, guys. So I really appreciate it. Thanks. All right, Donna, take care. Okay, bye.